Welcome to another CBJ podcast. I'm your host today, Scott Rennak, and I'm excited about the conversation I'm going to have with Jason Haas, longtime community member here in Colorado and the co-founder and owner of the G1 climbing gym in Broomfield, Colorado. He's going to share some of his stories and perspectives about grit and collaborating with other gyms and anchors in the wilds, and hope you enjoy the conversation. Before we get started, though, got a couple messages from our sponsors. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to have these podcasts.
Cascade Specialty. Since 1999, Cascade Specialty has installed and refurbished top quality flooring for both rope and bouldering areas. Learn more at cascadespecialty.com.
Rooney. Out of Norway, Rooney makes chalk and apparel for climbers, inspired by YouTuber Magnus Mitbo. Learn more at rungne.com.
Climbing Wall Association. CWA offers industry certifications, standards, events, and community connection, helping gyms stay informed and operate with clarity. Learn more at cwapro.org.
Essential. Distributors of holds, macros, and volumes. Essential also installs custom walls and flooring. Learn more at essentialclimbing.com. Approach. Founded by a multi-gym owner, Approach develops software to manage any climbing facility. Learn more at approach.app. Thank you for joining us for another CBJ podcast. I'm your host, Scott Rennak, and I am excited to be sitting down with Jason Haas, owner, founder of climbing gym in Broomfield, Colorado, longtime climber. And I asked him what his title was. He's a co-founder. He said, I'm the janitor. I'm the CEO. I don't really, but welcome to the podcast, janitor Jason.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Yeah, it's been good, man. We've been friends, 20 years now. I'm glad to be doing this interview with you.
Yeah, we both came from the Midwest.
That's true. Yep, I grew up in Michigan, moved here almost 25 years ago, and never looked back.
Did you climb back there?
Oh, yeah. First place I learned to rock climb was called Grand Ledge. It was just outside of the Michigan State University campus. And the joke there is if you don't like a route, just wait a week. It would be different because it's so chossy. They only let you top rope. You can't lead anything there. Little 30-foot sandstone choss pile by the river. But it's beautiful, and I love it to death. Very nostalgic.
There's a lot of people in this country, in this world, that get hooked on little chossy, whatever kind of rock is local. And then you find yourself, you did a bunch of traveling before you moved out west, right, though? I mean, you were kind of hooked
I
on
lived, a little over a year permanently traveling. Lived in a van kind of idea before it was cool. No Sprinter van setup back then. Lived in a Saturn, really, if we're being honest. But yeah, it took me to Alaska. It took me to Africa. Did climbing kind of everywhere as well as locally. So yeah. And honestly, what was weird about that road trip is that I skipped Colorado kind of altogether because I thought I was going to land here. So spent a ton of time in Waco, ton of time in Joshua Tree, and passed through Colorado a couple times, getting back and forth between the red or whatever. But I figured I was going to land here permanently. So no need to climb out the routes early.
Wow. That's good planning. That's fantastic. And when did you come out here?
2002.
2002. Okay. So that's like a couple of the gyms were starting to, like the OG gyms of today were starting to open. It was pretty sparse still at 2002.
Paradise, I think, was around. Rockin' and Jammin' had a North gym. I helped open the South gym with them. I worked there kind of doing all the roles as I was in graduate school. Boulder Rock Club. And then the Spot, I can't remember if they were open before I moved here or right around that time, but all those guys were kind of all popping up right around the same time.
I didn't realize you worked at Rocket and Jam. And one of the questions I was going to have is I know you're, and for our listeners who want to hear of the glorious stories of Africa and Alaska, we're not actually going to get into that today. We're going to talk about the industry and climbing gyms and
Yeah.
stuff. But you have some serious cred on rock. And I didn't know you worked in the gyms. I was going to ask how you made that transition to deciding to build a gym. But
Yeah.
what happened between moving? Were you involved in the industry back before you moved to Colorado at all? Or
Not well, sort of. I would call it almost industry adjacent. So I had a home wall in college for almost the entire time I was in there, right? And really, I grew up in Michigan, as I said, and Michigan State didn't have a climbing gym. I believe they still don't have one in that area, East Lansing. So we would drive over to Planet Rock in Ann Arbor and things like that. But for the most part, that's an hour and a half, and we didn't all have cars. And so I had a home wall and got a big kick out of like setting routes all the time in there for my friends, and we'd change it up, and we'd have these big gatherings all the time during the week. And so that's how it started. And then I started working at, it was called Galleons. If you've ever been into Dick's Sporting Goods and they have a home or a big old Nycros wall in there, it was a Galleons at one point and they got bought out. So I ran those for initially like a local one, and then it was like all of Michigan, and then it was all like the Midwest as I wrapped up college. And that was I was everything for that weird department store wall, the route setter, the manager, the scheduler, like all the things. So then when I moved eventually to Colorado, I got a job at Rockin' and Jammin'. John and Deb were really cool to bring me in. And I started as a route setter, but in those days, you kind of wear all the hats. It was a lot more informal days, a little bit more loose with how we did everything, and you just sort of helped out where you were needed. So if you need more hours or they just needed something else, I'd pick up desk shifts. And I started and ran their youth program for a little while, and that kind of ebbed and flowed, rose and died a few times. But yeah, did all the hats for Rockin' and Jammin' through graduate school. And then I've been in the industry or industry adjacent kind of that whole time, whether that's like a sponsored athlete for whatever that means, or writing for the climbing magazines back then, or doing guidebooks. So kind of always trying to find a way to make it work in the climbing world. My real job, if you will, for about 15 years was I was a teacher, but still writing guidebooks and still setting occasionally and things like that. And so eventually pivoted to feeling like I could make the gym be my real job and real, climbing full time.
well, I know you've never stopped climbing, but so you're like a 25-year industry veteran too. As much as I know you, I didn't actually realize that.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. But you had the day job like most people, and
I did. Yep.
What was it that teed you into saying you wanted to open your own gym? What happened?
Yeah,
there?
so I feel like, there was a really pivotal moment, right? But in general, is that teaching was really satisfying, but it became harder and harder to ignore outside politics and influence. There's just a lot of big money and big politics trying to come into your classroom and influence what you do, and that really weighed heavy on me. And the joke that I would always say as a teacher is, I've broken my arm and I've been to the hospital. Well, that doesn't mean that I know what a doctor does. And so you get all these people that are like, yeah, well, I went to school, and so I know what a teacher does. And like, you get to see the finished, polished product. You don't get to see the lesson planning and the one-on-one engagement that they do with kids and the relationships they build. So that was burning me out a little bit. And where I always found solace in rejuvenation was always rock climbing. Normally the act of rock climbing, but any way that I could try and do climbing made me happy. And the pivotal event to how G1 got to be was, again, I was a teacher, and it was spring break, and I went rock climbing with a friend who was also a teacher. So we had the week off. We're hanging out in Boulder Canyon, and she says, she's kind of newer to town. She's like, hey, I want to open a gym. And I started peppering her with a whole bunch of questions, and she was like, you seem to really know all about gyms. And I was like, I know a thing or two. And push comes to shove, we decided to kind of go for it. I write up a business plan to see if it's viable, do a lot of, market research and testing the demographics and things like that, and seemed really like we had a chance to give it a go. And in long story short, she ended up bowing out of the project, but I got far enough along, spent about 2 years thinking about, is this real? Could it work? Where would we put it? And that's a tough challenge. We bounced locations, we bounced towns. We'd be under contract for land, and then something would happen, it'd fall apart, and we'd have to move and start over. So, but yeah, I mean, 2 years into it, it felt like this is real, this is viable, let's do it. And so, I wouldn't even say that I quit my job. We started doing it, and the building was, we built from the ground up. And so the building was very much under construction, and I was still working full time, and I have a family and kids and trying to be very present for that. So it was a big juggling lift for a long time, but, anyway, came through on the other end. Now I just get to do the job as a gym owner full time, and I love it.
I remember when you kind of first planted your flag, and then something it's within that particular business park delayed you another year or two.
Yeah, the initial property was owned by the city. We were going to be in the town of Golden, and so we were buying a couple acres. And it turns out that it was adjoining to a much larger plot of land. And so as we went through that process, the city of Golden actually owned the land. And so they came to us and said, hey, this big tech company wants all 50 acres. So if you want to buy all 50 acres for multi-million dollars, you can have it. And we were like, no, we only wanted the 2 or 3 acres that we had agreed upon. And they're like, yeah, well, see you later. And they kind of kicked us out. And even though you're like, people would say, oh, well, they can't legally do that. But that is true. And they said, go ahead and bring your lawsuit. So when you're a startup and you want to fight a city, I don't recommend it. I would recommend you just go find a new plot of land, which is what we did.
Yeah, sometimes the big dogs come along. And what was that so that conversation in Boulder Canyon to opening day? How long did that take?
Oh, to opening day, at least 3 years. Yeah. I come from sort of humble beginnings, so I don't have a lot of financial means myself. So I had to raise a lot of capital through investors. And what I will say, right, Scott, you and I have known each other 20 years. And so I've known most of these investors 20 years. They're other climbers in the Boulder area. I feel very fortunate to call my friends, and they trusted me, right, with their money and their resources, and I wanted to do right by them. So, spent a long time talking to friends and folks to try and raise capital, and then get a business loan and all that. And then again, building ground up is epic. It was probably 18 months to do that.
It's beautiful. You drive down, it really stands out on that area. Was that there's a huge residential complex across the road that was like under construction while you were under construction, right? Or was that already in?
On the road, there used to be that event center where they would do music concerts and things like that, and that was really it. There was a road that would lead into the area, and they tried to kind of build up a little bit of shops to like be supported by the event center, and that was it until we got going, and then. Basically, at the same time, yeah, it started to fill in, and it's still filling in. It's a huge property over there, and it's parceled out, and so there's like different owners of apartment complexes or whatever. But yeah, feel fortunate.
When you chose your plot of land, did you know that all was happening across the road?
Kind of had that inclination. We actually were across the road is like the second location that we fell to, and that fell apart. And that fell apart after like city council approval. It was part of a really big land sale. So we were part of it, but there was also a Porsche dealership and a Starbucks and, big corporations. And not to get into the weeds on it, but the landowner tried to kind of change the terms of the agreement at the last minute, and every one of the buyers backed out. And we were back to square one for the third time, and ended up just going across the street. So we went, I don't know, 500 yards from that second location. And here we are. And actually, that moved even then too. So we went to the end of the block. We were at like, this is us on the corner. And then that went through city approval, and the seller owned the whole cul-de-sac that we were in. And they're like, you know what? Go to the end of the block. So fourth spot is the charm.
That last one was the one I remembered. I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
But you kind of, it's so, people build gyms all over the place, right? And the old mode was like find a warehouse complex and, build your gym and, that 25 feet that you get. You kind of got the perfect situation. Some levels is like you got in before the local residences got built. So I see you were like a lot of like just empty land at that time, and it seems like you've made a good play there.
Yeah. And there's not difficulties there, because why people choose a pre-existing warehouse with 25-foot ceilings is like it fits zoning. And so we were only cleared for, I think, 30, maybe 40 feet clear height for our building. And we back up to the local regional airport. The runway, like if I look out the window right now, I can see the runway. And so we weren't allowed to be as tall as we are, and went through this whole zoning process, and the city was really against it and all these problems. And then ultimately they said, if the airport is okay with it, we're okay with it. Anyway, I got FAA to sign off on some paperwork, and but again, like there's always hurdles, and that's, man, everybody you interview can give you endless hours of hurdles, and you're like,
do you get people call you up and pick your brain about, because it was a little, especially in Colorado, you were kind of known as it was a difficult project to get open.
Yeah. I did an interview yesterday to a college student, actually, is a member's daughter who's getting her business degree. And so she was asking about some of the trials and tribulations and how you do it. But yeah, I get probably an email every other week saying from somebody I want to open a gym. Can you help me out?
That's one of the things I know about you is that you'll talk with folks, and you've been a big part of the local community long before you built the gym. And one of the things that you've done at that gym and the region is this, you call it the climb pass, the connect pass. What's this called?
Yeah. The climb pass.
The climb pass.
Yeah, it was a multifaceted idea of what it does. Essentially, the way that it works is that your membership here gets you into 7 other gyms in the Colorado Front Range. One of the other gym owners from Ascent Studio is a brilliant computer programmer. And so he wrote a separate software that works with all of our point of sale software, like Rock Gym Pro that everybody uses. So you come in and you can scan your scan tag from Ascent Studio, and it'll run on another program that we all use, and it says, yep, they're a member of Ascent Studio. And so you can keep a lot of their information private, right? Of like, we all trust each other, but at the same time, if you're like, I don't want to give you all of their information or whatever, you can do that. And so, people drive down from Fort Collins and say, I'm from Ascent Studio. We put it into the database, kicks in, and you get a free admission into G1 as well. And it's somewhat of a response to, we're in a super dense climbing gym market, and we compete with very, very well-established gyms that have multiple locations in the area. And it's not easy to open a gym, let alone multiple gyms, right? And so what way could we give the most benefit to our members? We think that we do a really good job with quality, but it's really hard to fight the quantity argument. If anybody is like, hey, I'm not going to get a membership here, I want to go somewhere else because they have 3 gyms. I get that. And we don't have a good way to counteract it until we had the Climb Pass. And I'll tell you, like, that's been great for our members and other gyms members. But honestly, Scott, the best thing about the whole thing has been how it's brought the other gym owners closer together. For me personally, I get so much out of that. We can ask each other of like, hey, this happened, or like, do you have a good contact on during COVID, right? We had like, does anyone have a good contact on hand sanitizer? Well, that has carried through today, right? Of like, how are your top ropes doing? Are they wearing out too fast? How do you handle this? We feel very comfortable asking questions that you maybe otherwise would be guarded to ask, or even embarrassed to ask, right? Of like, I got this tough situation. What do you think? Right? Of like, maybe I've been in this industry so long, I should have the answer, and you don't. But so you go to each other to trust them to help guide you through it. I don't know. It's an amazing group. I feel like we're a really big group of collaborations more than like competitors now as a result.
No, it's beautiful. That's why I brought it up, because we'll go back in time a little bit further, because you again been a big part of the community, but these days you're a big part of that business community. And do you guys ever get together? Like I say, guys, yeah,
Yeah,
is there ever a coffee or a
be
beer
much
moment?
better about it. Yeah, we used to be much better about it, and it wouldn't be necessarily just climb past people. It would be all the gyms in the area. We would kind of send an email and just say, "Hey, does anyone want to get together for a beer?" And one of the gyms, in the climbing collective, had a gym in Longmont, and then they opened a new one in Longmont. And so that owner was like, "Hey, can we all get together and have a beer?" And like, "Oh yeah, let's celebrate your new gym," and things like that. So it's been good. And it's interesting with this Climb Pass, again, like we compete with each other. And so the Boulder Rock Club is part of our Climb Pass organization, and they're one of the closest gym to us. And so you would say, why would I engage with my closest competitor? And I'd be foolish to say, or disingenuous to say that we're not competitors. We absolutely are competitors. But I think if you take the approach of more of like, again, we're collaborators. We both are just trying to have people rock climb and have a good time with it, that you can both be successful and not, be transparent and not cannibalize each other. And of course, friction happens. And you're like, ooh, sorry, this interaction happened, whether I was engaged in it or not. But this Climb Pass deal has given us a little bit more respect with each other of like, yeah, I know Jason, and it wasn't intentional, and we'll work through it or whatever. Yeah, it's interesting, man. It's a different approach for sure, to not view it as like, how do I defeat my competitor, to more of like, how do I embrace them and that we're in it together.
It's been a couple of years. This thing started. It's been like 2 years ish.
Yeah, I think this is going on the third year. Yeah, and it started in some ways of like, we would collaborate with each other during the COVID times. We'd all jump on a call and sort of just cry our sorrows, right? Of like, yeah, this is tough. And we opened a week before being shut down by COVID. So like, we didn't have much to contribute to the conversation other than just being sad and recognizing a little bit of like, the world's different since that time. I know it was 6 years ago, but the economy today is tough for a lot of people, and having expendable income and discretionary income is tough. And so again, like leaning on each other for strategies of like, it's in my best business interest for you to also succeed, right? It doesn't mean that I should be the only gym in town. We should be growing more rock climbers, more people to the sport. It's a different approach, and not everybody would agree with it, but it's been working for us.
Do you think it can export? I know folks from around the country have reached out to you about like how the technical aspects of how it comes together. But would you say what would you say to someone that's kind of thinking like, in our metro, there's a handful of gyms, and how would you get something like this started, do you think?
Yeah, I think it really works. It's how open-minded you are and how much you're willing to communicate and collaborate and let go of some of it, right? If you're a gym owner, you're used to being sort of in charge. Nobody can tell you no. And your way or the highway sort of mindset can easily happen. And when you're working with other gym owners who have, are not accountable to anybody else, then you have to be willing to be flexible on it. And again, being willing to be vulnerable and share some of your information and be open to that. And I don't think that it has to happen in just a small geographic area. We are restricted to Colorado. People have asked out of state, but we haven't seen that it makes a lot of sense yet for us. But we run up and down the entire Front Range. So we're sort of in the middle, like where Denver is. And then we have a Climb Pass gym in Colorado Springs, which is about an hour and a half south. And then Fort Collins, hour and a half north. So from Fort Collins to the Springs, it's 3 hours apart. And we share the data of like, I don't just see how many Climb Pass users from other gyms come to G1. We see it to each other, and we share it on a spreadsheet. And so we can use it, informed data to make more decisions. But anyway, those Fort Collins and Colorado Springs gyms are 3 hours apart, and they have people utilizing each gym. So it can work if you're in the Midwest and the gyms aren't that close to each other, can totally work. Or if you're in a more dense market, and say like Southern California area, it can be more dense. do gyms want to work together? And I always thought about how some of those gyms in Southern California are doing the alternative youth series, and they've been doing a lot of collaboration that way, that they're doing the same thing, but in a different scope. And so they're working with youth, and we're working with, sort of adult members, but they're still collaborating. And I got to believe that their communications extend beyond just the youth program. And they're like, hey, since you and I have connected, can we maybe ask you about how you do this other thing? I don't know. Yeah. Open-mindedness, man. And just embrace the community.
It's beautiful. It's like the old industry for those of us who've been around. Like when there was only one gym in each town, it was easy to talk to each other, but it gets a little tougher when we encroach on each other. But I'm a big believer in just reach out and be friends. And then there's benefits because you have other people that can help solve your problem when there's conflicts. You've got a basis of understanding, so you can reach out and solve it. I bet it's really beautiful. And we did back in the day when I first moved to Colorado, we did a comp series that was up and down the Front Range. And back before the insurance got involved, we would the whole basis on the arrangement was that each gym would send a route setter to each comp. So that would give the host gym a fresh ideas and fresh perspectives, not just their route setters. It would spread the cost so they didn't have to pay for everybody, their whole team to, do a regular comp. And, but I don't think insurance would let us do this anymore.
No, totally. But honestly, like the idea really stems from some of those influential olden days where you had Rockin' and Jammin' in Thornton, which is, closer to Denver. And then you had Boulder Rock Club in Boulder. And as an employee of Rockin' and Jammin', we got to go to Boulder Rock Club for free, right? And it was trading these route setters to try and get inspired by it. But it was like, we view you as a partner in this, even though members would swap between Rockin' and Jammin' and Boulder Rock Club. It was still like, hey, how can we work together? And that was really impactful for me. And obviously it's lasted with me. That was 20 years ago.
It just creates a good vibe because when you're out at the crag or the boulder, nobody cares which gym you're from. We're all just climbers. So it was so on that side. I have to ask because our listeners won't know. So Jason, two things I know about Jason I could talk. One, he is a prolific first ascensionist, and that has led him to author. I think you've authored multiple guidebooks. You tell me, but I know the one that everybody knows here in Colorado is the Flatirons climbing guidebook. You wrote that, and you climbed every route in the book, is what I've heard, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, there's a few that either I couldn't find or there would be like some weird aid route. Yeah, but I personally wrote 12 books in my day, and I started to publish a guidebook publishing company for a while and tried to make everybody do that same philosophy of like, hey, you want to write a guide, thanks for the credit there. But I think of my friend Cole Fennell, who wrote the guidebook to Arkansas, and it's the state of Arkansas, and kind of said, hey, this is how I've done it. And he was the first author that was willing to work with me. And it said, I believe in a good quality product, so you should climb all the routes. It took a long time to climb all the routes, right? But he's got a phenomenal product, a great guidebook. He now publishes it on his own. I sold my shares and whatever, but it's still the book for Arkansas. And I don't know, man. I just try to make a book that I personally would want to use, and I don't know. I still carry that through to running a gym that I want to climb in, right? So just trying to be a good thing.
It's like giving back to the community in various ways. I mean but that's a particularly thankless endeavor for the amount of effort that you got to put into a guidebook.
If you calculated gas mileage, especially at today's prices, you lost money, right? So don't go writing guidebooks thinking you're going to get rich.
Why did you write them?
Again, it was twofold. One is that I wanted a book that I wanted to use, right? So I got really frustrated. I came from an area, I've been a climber a long time. And so came from an area where they're all black and white. A lot of them are hand-drawn topos. And I didn't mind getting sandbagged on the route. I really got frustrated no offense to Richard Rosser, he's a dear friend, love him to death. We've been friends 30 years. But I would get frustrated getting lost on the way to the crag. And so the adventure should start once you tie in, not like when you leave the car. So that was one of it. And two is that it's selfish. I love to climb new routes. And I have over 700 first ascents to my name, but that's not what I mean. I just mean routes that are new to me, which is also why it's great in the gym, because they turn over every 4 to 6 weeks, right? And so like, I have this uncanny ability to remember the movement or the beta on routes. And so I found more enjoyment of climbing something on site. Like, I don't know where I'm going. And so I'd climb it, whether it was 5-7 or something much harder, easy or hard, didn't matter. I climbed it. What's the next thing hold? And so I had this like brush fire approach to just rock climbing. And long before writing a guidebook, I learned to rock climb mostly in the red. Like, I mean, I learned in Michigan, but I cut my teeth in the Red River Gorge. And my guidebook was just written in it constantly. Bolt route or count is a little different. But when I learned to climb trad, I'm a self-taught trad climber, I would write down the gear. And it started because I was like, I don't know how to climb trad. I'm bringing everything with me. I can't look up a route and know that a number 5 Camelot doesn't fit on this finger crack. Have no idea. I'm going to bring it all with me. So I would take notes in my guidebook and be like, hey, if you ever come back to this route, leave that boat anchor on the ground. So it just sort of, I don't know, organically grew from there. And again, yeah, I just selfishly love to climb new things and was really fortunate to have a really great, amazing climbing partner who also loved to just climb new things. So it worked out.
Yeah, there's a many of climb that has Jay Haas on the in the guidebook. I use that from time to time up there. So, part of establishing routes, of course, is also putting in bolts, and trying to set them up in some semblance for safety for future use, right? Was that, well, maybe I'm making that up. What was that in your mind when you're putting up that phase, and then you start to document it and share the documentation? Did that kind of shape how you put up routes? Maybe I just make, like I said, maybe I just made that up.
It's an interesting pathway. Again, I'm an old climber, but I think I kind of learned to climb in this weird middle generation. So if you climbed in the 70s, there was a lot of one-to-one mentorship, right? I'll take you under my wing. I'll teach you all the tricks and the trades and how to tie the knots and all of that. And then that started to fall out a little bit, but gyms were not so prevalent when I started to climb. So I learned to trad climb from reading Freedom in the Hills. If anybody knows it, it's like this fat of a phone book, even though we don't have phone books anymore either. And I mean, even back then, in the late 90s or early 2000s, the drawings looked like it came out of the 50s, and like Maurice Herzberg, trying to get up, K2 or something. And so it was bad then. And so just teaching myself everything that it was. I started sport climbing. I taught myself trad climbing. And then I fell in love with trad climbing, the adventure of it. And so when I started putting up routes, I started putting up trad climbs. And then also climbing anything and everything. What I ended up finding is that the descents were really sketchy on the obscure stuff. And even if I put up a route that I thought was going to be obscure, nobody was going to climb. Like, ultimately, you choose, and I got known for doing really dangerous death routes, and I really liked it, honestly. I climbed a lot of X-rated things near my limit. And that was a very conscious choice. I know, or I feel like I know what my ability is. I can do this move or I cannot. And I backed off tons of routes, right? And so we all choose to go up the route, and we all feel like we know what our ability is. And that's all great. But then you get to the top and you come down, and it's all entirely out of your hands. And so that's where I started to like really think about anchors. Was it's no longer about how good of a rock climber I am, right? Unfortunately, there was a really terrible accident in Flemnos this week. When the double anchor failed. And I don't know the circumstances around that, but that's the thing that you always try to avoid, right? Is like, you can be as sketchy as you want on the way up because that's your choice. But as soon as you're rappelling, that's somebody else's choice of what kind of hardware they put in, or the webbing around a tree or whatever. So it shifted how I put up routes, but also I pivoted into more than establishing, I started to do a lot of rebolting. I was a founding member, if you will. I helped create the Boulder Climbing Community, which is the big nonprofit climbing organization in the Boulder area. And the project that I got most passionate about was bolt replacement. And so I started this initiative, if you will, and it grew and it grew and it grew, which has been amazing. And now it's this beautiful animal, way beyond anything I would have ever dreamed that it could be. And, I'd teach a few people to replace bolts, and then it grew into days when we'd replace entire crags, and it'd be like hundreds of bolts in a day. And I'm so fortunate that it's still going on, right? But anyway, the point would be like, I got to the top, and it could be a sport route, but it's an older sport route from the 80s. And you get up there and you got this really sketchy anchor, and you're like, man, I don't want to die rappelling. Let's put some new good hardware in there. And it changed my perspective of like anchors I put on in my obscure, terrible FAs.
Would you put anchors in for some of those, or just leave them wild?
I got better and better about it as I went on. I did it in my teens is when I started, and I'm embarrassed to say that I've rappelled off a Nalgene as an anchor. Yep. Don't recommend it. It was just in a crack and wrapped off. And I've done tons of terrible anchors on, like, I've climbed big mountains and basically every continent. And sometimes you're just in a situation where you just start leaving your rack and you make it out of it. But that's not what we're talking about. And so when we did, the pivotal change was we did 3 cracks in a row. They were not very good, but they were right next to each other, and we called it gluteus maximus hold. You can kind of infer what that meant. And they were not good. And so we put junk anchors on them, thinking nobody would ever climb them, hence the name, right? And people did. And it made me really rethink of like, okay, I mean, something inspired me to get up this crack. It's going to maybe encourage somebody else to get up it too. And so we went back and, put anchors on things. And again, I would feel responsible for encouraging people like, this climb is so amazing, you should go climb it. but figure out the descent on your own. I hope you don't die. I've matured a lot in that regard.
I mean, I think we as a community and as a sport have grappled with the anchor issue that you're talking about. And it's like, there's places where it's pretty, well, the ethics are pretty open, and you get to like Red Rocks where you can go do, 8, 10, 15 pitches, and they're really well bolted, and it's fairly safe to get off of them and on them. And there's talk about how we hope that doesn't happen to the diamond, but maybe it should happen to the diamond. Like, there's places that the ethics don't support that. But I guess
German and I replaced the entire wrap on the diamond. So the rappels are all bomber. We became Park Service employees in order to do that. It's no story for another day. But but individual anchors. But the only thing I will say about that was that was a really big collaboration lift with the Park Service, because people are not going to take a drill out in the middle of nowhere and replace somebody else's root anchors. Like that's just been what's been shown. So you're right. Like, how do we keep these things safe long term? It takes a lot of people and a lot of coordination.
We're to these like second and third generation of climbing now, and we realize these things are going to just keep getting traffic. So, I mean, that's one of the things, again, for our listeners that don't know of Jason, he's pretty well known locally for kind of spearheading this rebuild effort. And it's something it's really the whole world needs this, every sport climbing area. And you're starting to see it more and more at the older areas. But I guess I'll say thank you on behalf of climbers for doing that. Did it ever tie in? Was it ever part of the industry piece? That, like, you've been a route setter and you've worked in the industry. Was it just a totally separate thing? You were a route climber, you were first ascensionist, and that was different than
consciously independent. Subconsciously, I think it's all tied together. Creating a nonprofit organization is about giving back to it. Just feeling like wanting to give back to a sport that has given me so much, really like purpose and now a livelihood. But this whole core value of like, if you take care of something, it'll take care of you, right? And we throw the word community around a lot. And this is a little segue, right? But we opened a week before COVID shut us down. We had on a Sunday, we had a grand opening party. It was free to come into the gym. It was like shoulders, 2,000 people in this building. And then the following Saturday, it was me. And that's it. In a dark building that I thought I put everything on the line for. And that it was a very sad, dark times, right? And members that we had no relationship with, by and large, stuck with us. And they kept their membership running through that time. And I mean, obviously very humbled and grateful for that, but they had no reason to do that. And, I feel like every day we've been trying to pay that back. And you can use that in any kind of context, right? And so feeling like, again, climbing has given me a lot. And I hope to keep trying to give climbing something. And so trying to take care of it and build that, take care of anchors or do whatever for it. And just, I don't know, I'm rambling now.
It's because you love it and you've been doing it forever as part of your DNA. You are a climber. I'm curious how you feel about not everybody comes into the industry these days. Not many people at all come into the industry with your kind of history and cred and, tick list. A lot of people are just climbing indoors. A lot of people that are building new gyms don't have a whole lot of connection to the outdoor sport or, deep history. I'm curious if you have an opinion about what our responsibility as an industry with that, whether it's anchor replacement. I mean, the nonprofit that you helped found, which I was part of as well. So I've known you for a little. We've known
absolutely
known you for a long time. It was not just that. It was a trail hardening, right? Reducing erosion by putting in rock steps, and not just wood steps, rock steps that'll last 100 years. It was poop bags to keep the human waste out. Like, it's all of this care of our climbing areas, and certainly anchors are a huge part of that. But I'm just curious how you feel like where the intersection of that stewardship and industry is, where you think it's obviously really big part of your personal kind of ethos. Yeah. But
again, I feel fortunate for my age and of coming along in the sport when I did that. I think that there's been a big shift, right, of what you were just talking about with trails and poop bags and all of those things, that we've had to have a fundamental shift in what we think it is to be able to go out and rock climb and use a resource. And I think there's also been a shift in terms of what is the responsibility of a climbing gym, where people, by and large, learn to climb indoors instead of outdoor. Like, I learned outdoors, and that would be pretty rare today. And so people are learning indoors. And what is a gym's responsibility to do that? And I don't think that there's a clear answer that we all are responsible to do this. As we were talking in the past, you and I, Scott, is that our gym is located in a very climber-centric area, same as like if you're in Salt Lake and things like that, where a lot of our members and even just day pass users come in very well climber educated. They know the ropes, if you will. And so that's not true in less outdoor rock climbing centric areas. And so those gyms probably have a greater degree of responsibility. And we certainly still offer it. I don't know. I think that whole conversation is really evolving, and cut this if it's boring and long, or skip ahead, people. But one of the things that when I started replacing bolts that really got under my skin, that I would spend all day and I would replace these bolts, and it'd be like same hole. I'd take all that metal out of there, which was really tedious, instead of just snapping it off and patching it. And I'd, put all my effort into this, and I'd be really tired. And I spent my day doing that instead of rock climbing. And then somebody would come through and they would rock climb up and they would top rope through the anchor. And that would really, really, really bother me, because instead of using their own quick draws, which will wear down, they're going to wear down this anchor. And the experience has shown people are not replacing these anchors. It's people like me out here, and I'm few and far between. And it really bothered me. And one of my really good friends, his name is Greg Barnes, and he is the head of the American Safe Climbing Association, the ASCA. If you don't know it, look it up. It's an amazing organization. It's national. It's like the Access Fund. You should support it. There's my soapbox. So Greg is in charge of sending out these bolts to people like me all over the country. and it's free, right? It's because it's a donation-based organization, and so it doesn't cost. I don't buy these bolts. He just gives them freely to people like me to replace bolts around the country. That work has slowed, where most of their energy has moved into what's called mussy hooks. They're essentially really big steel quick draws. You just clip the rope into it just the way you would at the top of a climbing gym. And if the ASCA has embraced clipping through and lowering off rather than clipping into your own quick draws and then feeding the rope and untying all of that, who am I to not embrace that as well, right? Of like, I mean, this is the national organization. They are the authority, and I'm just some guy. And changing my mindset of like, what is my responsibility to it is really shifted. And so what's my responsibility for the gym? And what we try and do is put a lot of opportunities for education out here. We don't try and ram our philosophy down people's throats, but we have, an anchor set up on the ground where it's like, Scott, I don't know if you learned the same way I learned. I climbed a route, I got to the top, and then somebody yelled at me from the ground how to clean the anchor, right? And at the bare minimum, gyms today should have an anchor on the ground where you and I can walk through that, without any kind of, are you sure you're tied back in and you might die right now kind of situations. And it can obviously evolve into much more complex obligations to help climbers be successful outside. But I don't know. The answer lies somewhere in between of like, where do we... I think the pendulum swung to the gyms were responsible for all education and all stewardship and making sure that the crag doesn't have trash at it and all of these things. And I think the answer honestly lies somewhere in between, that the gyms do have a responsibility. They do need to provide resources and education to people, but also people are accountable for their own actions. And I shouldn't, as a gym owner, have to tell you to not leave your trash at a crag, not to cut down a tree, not to do whatever. We are all in it together, which maybe is the theme of this conversation.
Yeah, it's actually up for grabs that there are plenty of business owners that have climbing gyms that say it's not my responsibility at all. Yeah, and that's one of the conversations that I think we have to have as an industry, and find the right intersection of this messaging. And you're talking about safety. I think it's a done deal. Like you could have, and I think you teach rescue classes. Like you could sell programming about that, and it's keeping your members alive. That's a no-brainer. Like sell those programs, sell those classes, keep your members alive. It gets a little fuzzier when you're talking about, poop and trash and staying on the trail. And hopefully
but we offer a lot of those classes for free because that's where we've landed on what's our obligation is like, hey, we want to present this opportunity of information, experience, and share that with you so that you're successful out there, especially from a safety standpoint of how to not, climbing outside has a lot of similarities, but it is very different than in a gym in terms of how to get up, how to get down, and read a route. Are you on the right route? All of those, rock can break, all the things. And so we try and if the barrier happens to be financial, great, let's cut that barrier down and try and make it accessible. And then it's up to you to take that next step.
At the end of the day, there's a lot of personal responsibility, and even personal responsibility in the gym, and that gets to, auto belays has been a big hot topic. And what can you do at the end of the day? We don't want our gyms to have someone sitting there on a stool at the bottom of the auto belays, clipping them in like you might do in an amusement park. But anything less of that leaves this personal responsibility issue. And how do you close that gap? And I'm not asking for any. How do you deal with auto belays? I'm curious.
You're just talking about that whole idea of personal ownership. And I think the US and Europe have really interesting contrasting opinions on personal ownership of it. If you go, my experience with going into a gym in Europe is, hey, do I have to take a belay test? And they're like, do you not know how to belay? And you're like, yeah, I do. You're like, okay, well, if you don't, you should tell me because that's on you, right? Like a little bit of a mindset of like, dude, don't be doing this if you don't know what you're doing. And in the US, it's all like, why didn't he tell me that I could die climbing 50 feet up into the air. So yeah, it's interesting. For auto belays, we have them. I don't want to say fought them, but we did not open with auto belays. We think that they present some great opportunities, but also have some challenges. They're awesome if you're like, I work 9 to 5, I got an hour lunch, I want to get in, do my workout, get out, or I got to get the kids after school, and I got to just crush as much as I can in a short amount of time. And so that is amazing. They're perfect for that, right? Of like, hey, no offense, I don't have time for a partner. Just get in, get out, right? I prefer to Boulder to do that, but auto belays are perfect for that. Where they're detrimental is if you're trying to build a community where everybody knows your name, right? Like a commercial Cheers, where it's like, oh yeah, we're all friends here. We all know each other. Because I've had experience, not in our gym, but in other gyms where, I'll go up the auto belay and I'll come down and then I turn and I just hand you the auto belay and then you go up and you go down. And we never stop and be like, hey, what's your name, Scott? Why don't we just climb together? I haven't had that experience by and large, that it's mostly just silent passing of auto belay clips. And so we didn't open with it. We really, really pushed meeting people, creating your own community, trying to find a partner. We have basically some type of meetup every single night, whether it's like for new climbers or for more experienced, or we have a women specific group, right, et cetera, et cetera. Again, pushing the like meet somebody. And a climbing gym, this isn't a sales pitch, right? But it's like a climbing gym is so much more than just the physical act of rock climbing and getting more physically fit. It's all about that friendship engagement. It's why you keep coming back. I'm very proud of our route setters and all the work that they do, but like that's only one piece of it. And it's an important piece of it, but so is the connection with your friend. And auto belays can inhibit that if you're not careful with it. So I think we did the auto belays really well. We have introduced them. We have 5 or 6 of them in the gym now, and people use them every day. And we make them go through an orientation, and they sign the little iPad saying, here's the rules and the little test. And knock on wood, we haven't had any accidents. But yeah, auto belays are tricky. It's a double-edged sword for sure. They have their benefits and also limitations.
Not every gym will have them, but I appreciate the same use case that you just went through. Every now and then you go in and you just want to get some laps in, and they're amazing for that. But also that breeds complacency if you're not careful. So hopefully we can keep. That's one of the things I know, like CWA and our industry at large is like we would like to keep not only auto belays but belaying in general. Like it's there is a lot of personal responsibility with this, and yeah, I guess getting towards the end of the hour, one question I like to ask anybody that's built a gym and run a gym is like, just like, do you have any lessons that you would pass on in these 5-6 years that you've been running? Is it like what's any golden ticket knowledge that you would pass on to our listeners?
Best advice I can give as an adult, right? More than climbing gym specific. It would be applied to any business that you want to own, but really just being a very successful human in any aspect is honestly, for me, number one thing is grit. You're going to have a lot of difficult times. You're going to fail. And, you have all those great things about like Ford failed and the guy that started KFC failed and like Walt Disney failed. And all of those, at least the businesses, because they got back up and they had the grit. And for us, it was really hard to open in like going into COVID. We didn't open like, oh yeah, COVID's happening. We know, okay, let's adjust. Like it was boom, right in your face. Take a sucker punch. And so we, that Saturday was just me. And then that Monday, I brought every employee in they were all going through training. We were open a week. Nobody knew me. We sat in a big circle under the lead cave, and I was like, write down on a note if you need you to keep getting paid or not, right? And so, like, as you would imagine, the college students were like, I'm part-time, I'm going home, no big deal. I hope you're still here at the end of this. And then the full-time people were like, yes, I need to live. And it's like, we'll pay until we can't. And we don't have reserves. We just opening. We don't have a lot of money. we'll keep doing it, and we're going to find a way. We're going to push forward, right? And it was not easy, but having grit to just keep going. And with that, combined with that grit, is being humble enough to realize you don't know all the answers. You're never going to know all the answers. So surround yourself with people that do, and have faith in those people, because they genuinely want to do good. They want to do a good job at your gym. So believe that. Sometimes you don't agree, and sometimes the work's not the standard or whatever that you want, but that wasn't intentional, right? They're doing their best, and you're doing your best. And so have faith in that.
Grit and trust your people. Lean in. I love that. Well, it's been fun. I had some other things we could talk about. We'll have to maybe have another conversation someday. But this was fantastic. And I said it earlier, and I'll say it again, because those people that replace anchors and take care of trails and do rescue work in the mountains, they just thank you from our community to you for your service, because we wouldn't have so much of what we get to enjoy outside without your efforts. So you've been a big part of the local climbing scene.
Oh, thanks, man. I don't do as much as I'd like to these days. My kids consume all my time, but I hope to get back to it.
Taking care of the next generation. Taking care of the next generation. I get that too. All right. Before we sign off, you got any shout outs? Anything anybody you'd like to say hi to?
Oh man, I don't know. Yeah. Hi, Mom. Right. No, I don't think I do. Other than actually, I do. I have one person I want to shout out. Is that all of this success? How did this happen? Is my wife. My wife, Erin, is an incredible human being. She supports me all the way around. And going back to that grit thing, it's not always been easy. It's been harder than it has been easy. And luckily, we're in it's a little bit easier time for the gym right now. But she is the silent. I get a lot of the praise for the cool work and the whatever great gym, but no, she's the amazing one behind the whole scene. She's the better half. So shout out to that lady.
We all need a better half.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for the time here, Jason. It was fun to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks, man. All right, it was good talking to you.
Well, thanks for spending an hour with us. Great conversation with Jason. I hope you got some things out of it listening to his perspective on gym collaboration and crag care and things like that. If you liked what you heard, we post these new episodes every 2 weeks. We kind of alternate. There's a route setting topic with Holly Chen, and then I talk to gym owners or business managers in our industry about what's going on. And make sure you subscribe, we're at climbingbusinessjournal.com and on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn at Climbing Business Journal. And we're on YouTube now at Climbing Biz. And make sure you follow us, and stay tuned. We'll see you next time.